existing or operating within inherent, permanently pervading and sustaining the universe. I can't quite remember what he was using that adjective about. Rob Watson, can I ask though,
after 9 hours?
I'm not going to ask you, but I'm going to ask you this.
Yes.
Everybody is saying what a terrific night this has been for the Conservative Party. But let me ask you a slightly counterintuitive question, which is that in the last Parliament, David Cameron was at the helm of a coalition which had a fairly healthy majority in parliamentary terms. If, as seems likely, the Conservatives essentially decide to go it alone because they're very, very close to an absolute majority in the Commons, but maybe don't quite have it, or one or two seats over, actually would it be a more tricky job for him because he will not be able to rely on occasionally recalcitrant Conservative MPs?
Absolutely, I don't think there's any doubt about that. That for the Conservatives, being in coalition with the Liberal Democrats, and privately, Conservatives will tell you this, it's been a lot easier. I mean, if you want to do some unpleasant things, like have to cut public spending, it's a lot easier to do it when you say, oh, it's not just me, Governor, but the Liberal Democrats are alongside. So I think in practical terms, that there's no doubt that on the day-to-day business of governing legislation, it could be far more difficult. On the other hand, I think certainly for now, I think you can't take the shine away from what David Cameron has achieved, because to the surprise, even of many inside his own party, I mean, he has achieved what only two prime ministers have achieved since the Second World War, and that is to increase his vote share as an incumbent. I mean, that is quite extraordinary.
And although we've been concentrating through the night on the issues that maybe have more obvious international resonance, such as, for example, Britain's place in the European Union, the referendum that there will be in 2 years' time on Britain's place in the European Union, one of the big challenges that David Cameron undoubtedly will have is this continuing adherence to trying to balance the books, some very, very, very tough public spending rounds he's going to have to get through.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, look, there's no doubt that this election, why have the Conservatives done well and why have the Labour done badly? I don't think there's any doubt that it's about the issue of economic competence. And there just seems to me there's no doubt about that Labour just could not shake off their record in government. That is not the same thing as to say that the British public are super enthusiastic about more austerity. They are not. But at the moment, David Cameron has the benefit of the doubt. And I think what he'll be hoping is that there's a kind of a strong global tailwind in his favour, that the rest of Europe starts to do better, that Britain's economy keeps recovering, and that will make austerity that much easier to swallow.
And in terms, we heard just there from Boris Johnson, who, I mean, already David Cameron has anointed as perhaps one of his three people who could succeed him, along with Theresa May, the Home Secretary, and George Osborne, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Finance Minister. I mean, how much is that sort of politicking, that sort of manoeuvring going to infect this government even before it gets going?
Well, not as badly as if he'd lost. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, the Conservative Party would have had David Cameron out far quicker than the Labour Party would get rid of Ed Miliband. It's that kind of party that Conservatives can be very ruthless.
But he can't govern for the full 5 years.
Well, I mean, he said he hasn't wanted to. I don't think it's going to be quite as damaging as the sort of long-running spat between Gordon Brown and Tony Blair. Was it wise that David Cameron have said he wasn't going to serve or try to serve 3 terms? Probably. But on the other hand, and this is important for people in this country and beyond, one of the things that I think makes David Cameron a fairly attractive leader, or perhaps I should say less unattractive than the others, is that he kind of seems a bit more normal. He doesn't seem like some desperate politician. I mean, the very fact that
You say that, but a lot of people do regard him as the posh boy from Eton.
Well, that's slightly different to saying he's a desperate politician. I mean, it's certainly true that his detractors will...
So normal in the sense that he has...
I think
he's not wedded to the political...
Yeah, he seems like the kind of person, I mean, correctly or not, that our voters will think, you know what, he looks like if he wasn't the leader of the Conservative Party, it wouldn't be the absolute end of the world. Whereas, for example, people used to think of Gordon Brown as being slightly odd, because they just couldn't imagine him doing anything other than politics.
He talked, Robert, in his speech when he retained his seat in Oxfordshire, of trying to be a one-nation Prime Minister, of extending devolution or furthering devolution to Wales and to Scotland. You know, in the aftermath of the Scottish referendum last year, he was very strong, it seemed, in terms of saying, right, it's the English turn now. it seemed like a change of language.
Absolutely. I think he moved very quickly on two fronts to address his perceived weaknesses. One is that the Tories are seen as being, Conservatives are seen as the party of the rich, the kind of bad off, and it's not seen as very nice. He immediately talked about spreading the benefits of Britain's economic recovery, but in pretty much the same breath, he was reaching out to the people of Scotland, saying that one of the first things we've got to do, sort out devolution, sort out more autonomy.
And actually, Rob, let's pick up from that point when we're talking about the future of Scotland as well. We can go to Val Sanderson, who's been there for us through this long night. Now, two thoughts for you, Val. One, well, how many seats has the SNP got? They've done very well, but they are not now the kingmakers at Westminster.
Well, that is true, Philippa. In fact, it's quite exciting here. Dr. Alistair Clark, Senior Lecturer of Politics at Newcastle University, is with me. We've got a recount going on, haven't we, Alistair?
We do indeed. There's news of a recount just broken in Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk between the Conservative candidate and the SNP. So watch this space. We thought it was all over, but there's still some drama left here tonight.
Yes, but we think that there's just going to be one Labour, one Tory, one Lib Dem, unless that recount goes through.
At the moment, if the Conservatives happen to win this, then we'll actually have two Conservative MPs, and that would equal the amount of pandas there are in Edinburgh Zoo. Something that the SNP have been taunting the Conservative Party with for quite some time. So that would be interesting, but the SNP will still be by far the largest party in Scotland.
And you've been looking at some of the front pages, haven't you, of the Scottish papers? How are they summing it up?
I have indeed. I mean, the Daily Record, the tabloid, is calling this historic. The Scotsman equally talking about how history is being made, but also editorially calling for electoral reform, a change to the first-past-the-post electoral system. The pro-independence National is highlighting the dilemma for the Scottish National Party here, saying how this is very much pro-independence, but problem for them with the Conservatives.
So that recount's going on in Berwick. We'll bring you more on that when we've got it. Now back to London.
Well, thank you very much, and we'll have more coverage for you of the results. It looks as if the Conservatives may get a slim majority, which wasn't expected by any of us when polls closed about 8.5 hours ago. Do stay with us here on the BBC World Service. The BBC World Service.
Social media, one of the self-styled Islamic State's most powerful tools.
They have foregone these traditional Al-Qaeda-style videos of old man with a beard reading these 45-minute to an hour-long sermons. And what they've done now is they have moved directly to these shorter Hollywood-style productions.
Join me, Dominic Casciani, in a two-part series as I examine the jihadist social media strategy and the attempts to combat it.
The way we see it is there's a role for blocking material, there's a role for law enforcement, but there has to be a role for counter-messaging.
But there's enough being done.
The time for talking about this stuff is over, and what we desperately need now is some action, and on an industrial scale.
The Islamic State's social media machine on the BBC World Service. Online at bbcworldservice.com/documentaries.
Welcome to the BBC World Service and an election special, bringing you all the details as a new British Parliament takes shape. That special with Tim Franks and me, Philippa Thomas. We're bringing you news of the winners and losers. The chief winner seems to be David Cameron, on course to stay on as Prime Minister, perhaps with a majority. A rather dreadful night, though, for Ed Miliband, who so wanted to supplant him in Downing Street. We'll bring you all the latest after a summary of the news. BBC News with Marion Marshall. After a dramatic night of general election results, Britain's Conservative Prime Minister David Cameron is heading for another term in office. With more than half the constituencies now declared, it looks like the Conservatives could win enough seats to govern alone. In the past hour, Mr Cameron spoke in his constituency.
My aim remains simple: to govern on the basis of governing for everyone in our United Kingdom. I want to make sure that our economic recovery reaches every part of our country. I want to make sure as our economy grows that the poorest in our country can benefit from that recovery and have the chance of work and a stronger future. And above all, I want to bring our country together, our United Kingdom together, not least by implementing as fast as we can the devolution that we rightly promised and came together with other parties to agree, both for Wales and for Scotland.
The leader of the main opposition Labour Party, Ed Miliband, described the results so far as disappointing and difficult.
This has clearly been a very disappointing and difficult night for the Labour Party. We haven't made the gains we wanted in England and Wales, and in Scotland we've seen a surge of nationalism overwhelm our party.
The Scottish National Party, which wants independence, is heading for a landslide victory north of the border, winning seats by huge margins from